All right, character design, what we're doing in this course. So character design is obviously the craft and process of producing drawn, modeled, or other medium personas for film, video games, and other industries. So for the entertainment industries, it makes sense, right? If you're making a video game or an animated film, you have to make your cast of characters that are going to, be participating in the film. But it is useful for other industries as well. So I was kind of alluding to this earlier, but if you think about it, you got Tony the Tiger, right, selling, Kellogg flakes, and you've got Geico the Gecko trying to sell you insurance. And there's a nicety in that if you have characters, because then people will recognize those characters. They get a lot of brand recognition. You can implement them into a variety of different uh, uh, things. So like you could have like, an animated commercial, or you could have that character performing the action that you want them to do. Or they, let's say you're Tony the Tiger, I can have him hanging, like an image of him hanging out with, a sports player or something, right? So they're useful for other industries, even outside of the entertainment industry. Now, as a character designer, some things that you would be more or less tasked with doing in order to perform your job would be, for one, research. This is probably the most important thing. Before you would produce any sort of character, you want to make sure that you understand the character as a whole. So you would need to know the basic anatomy of the character, right? So if it's a humanoid, you should just learn humanoid anatomy in general. But if it's an animal, like you're doing the different animals and like let's say Kung Fu Panda, right? You want to look up the anatomy of a panda and the anatomy of a red panda and anatomy of praying mantis and all these other things, because you need to make sure that the character not only visually looks like them, it'll make your drawings more accurate. You'll understand the structure better, but also they need to be able to function in that way. And if your design does not allow them to move in the correct manner, it's not going to work well. So um, that's really important. You also want to look up like what the time period is. So if it's like feudal Japan, right, you need to look up like what kind of clothes were they wearing? What was the environment like? What was the architecture like? What kind of colors did they have available? What did the artwork look like? If you look at most Disney films, although the designs are all kind of the same, right? The proportions are the same. They change the style of the film depending on where and when the film is taking place, and a lot of that's based off the artwork of the time period. So those are all very important. Um, if it's something that's based off of like books or literature or other medium, make sure you absorb that medium firsthand. Don't just look at secondhand versions of those. It really makes a big difference. So research is extremely important if you're doing character design. That should be first and foremost what you need to do. You also might need to direct to some extent or receive direction. And what I mean by that is, if you're creating a character, it might just be you, but more than likely you'd be working with a group of people, and everyone needs to have their styles commingle, right? It needs to be cohesive as a production. It needs to match the environment. If you're making cartoony characters and you're doing a horror game, right, it might not match, right? Unless you're doing like Bendy and the Ink Machine, but the backgrounds are also cartoony, right? So you want to make sure that everything kind of blends together. If it doesn't, it'll look weird. So you'll either need to receive some sort of direction from like an art director or the director, or you will have to dictate it one way or the other, but that will be part of it. Exploration. This is also an extremely important, not necessarily uh, thought of thing, but more than likely, like if they give you, like they want you to make a pig character, you're not going to draw one pig. What you're going to do is you're going to make a whole bunch of pigs, like as many as you can make, like hundreds of them. And then what you're going to do is you're going to present them to the director or art director, and they're going to go, I like the general tone of this one. I like the legs of this one. This one's face is getting close. I think if you push this one, blah blah blah. The outfit on that one makes sense. Basically, you're going to make a buffet table, and then they're going to pick and choose things that they like. Then you'll take those and you'll kind of put those together, and then you'll come up with more designs, right? Until you basically, and every time you bring them, they'll kind of tie it down a little bit more until you basically will come up with the final, design, right? So a lot of what you're doing is just coming up with ideas, just everything off the wall. It doesn't really matter. You're just going to do a whole bunch of things because the more options, the better. Eventually, once a design is sort of agreed upon, you will tie it down. And what that's going to mean is you'll take the design and you'll make sure that it's structurally sound. Um, so if it's like a 2D character design, you need to be able to tie it down in a way that it's easily repeatable so that you use primitive shapes to produce the character, that you have consistency between like different poses of the character. You have to draw them in different angles. You might make maquettes so that you can utilize those. Um, if it's gonna be a 3D model, you just make sure that it's got like it's very solid and that will work for like production purposes with rigging and animation and stuff. So that will be the last bit is like the final like clean version of it that everyone will use as a guide to throughout production.